Thank you. Mustafiz, I think, has spelled out the mission of this enterprise by all of us coming together and the purpose of this meeting. So I don't think I need to elaborate on that. The main issue, I think, really is that whether we as a community can assume any sort of responsibility for seeing that this sort of incident is not repeated. Because as Mustafiz pointed out, this is not the first, and our apprehension was it may not be the last of such tragedies. We cannot ourselves change anything. We do not have the resources and we are not in a position to do that. But what we can do as a community assembled over here is to constantly keep both the attention of the government, the political players, the people of Bangladesh on this issue to see that we are meeting our responsibilities to the people who have in fact become victims, and also to those people who may well become victims in the future if we don't draw attention to this particular process. Right now, a great deal seems to be happening because the international community is putting us under severe pressure, and in fact is doing it in ways which could be potentially damaging to what is Bangladesh's principal export industry. That we should in fact need this pressure itself, we as citizens of Bangladesh should find unacceptable and indeed unfortunate, because we are the people who should be taking the lead in this process. And so our idea is to generate a broad awareness so this pressure can be generated on the government and on the industry, that they have got certain responsibilities and that how they discharge these responsibilities will in fact be taken into account. Now, at this stage, I will not elaborate on this, but I would like to point out that at this stage we should recognize that there are much deeper issues involved over here. And whilst our initiative today is to really look at what has been central to the immediate tragedy, the failures of regulation and oversight, the failures and deficiencies of the way in which the industry itself functions, and what actually may be done about this, we should recognize that there are problems which in many ways are going to be emerging from the nature of the sort of society we have created. Obviously, the back of this wasn't just a failure of regulation to oversee the building codes of the industry and to see whether in fact appropriate safeguards were in fact being met. I mean, the real problem which we were facing over here was the fact that you are operating in a globalized market system where large numbers of people in the industry feel that the only way they can remain competitive is by cutting costs at the expense of workers' wages and also their safety and security. This has become inbuilt into the globalized competitive process. And so this part of the agenda can obviously not just be discussed within Bangladesh, but we will have to address this problem globally. We may get lectures from our development partners that you must do this and you must do that. But at the end of the day, the global competitive world will go on as it has been doing, that Walmart, whatever standards they may wish to impose on us, are going to always be looking for the cheapest sources of supply. And that the customers of Walmart in New York or in other parts where their enterprises are located are not going to be looking at the labels on the cheap t-shirts they buy, but they are going to be looking at the price. And so this part of the process is going to be driving whatever happens in Bangladesh. And here again you have to recognize that whilst the Bangladesh component only accounts for $5 of the price of a shirt, the final price of that shirt at Walmart or Kmart in New York is going to be $25 or $30. So we have to also get accountability for the people who are appropriating those $25. And they too have to be made part of any process on how in fact value which is generated from the labors of our dead and injured workers is in fact created and distributed in the international economy. I think this has to be a major part of our agenda, and it is here that all our community over here will need to in fact draw in our partners around the world to participate in this discussion, because in their own countries this problem also is in fact creating and recreating this problem. Within Bangladesh also there are certain inherent problems which we have to realize and we have to cope with. It is again partly being recognized because it is being thrust upon us that we do not give any rights to these workers. We don't give any rights to these workers because part of being globally competitive is to make sure that workers have no rights, so that you can fire them at will. And this means that they function as casualized labor in the global system, and you have no fixed obligations to them because they are casualized workers. This gives you an enormous amount of flexibility, and there is now considerable international and theoretical support for this under what is known as labor market flexibility. That is how we are supposed to stay competitive. So this again is an issue which has to be fought, and it has to be resisted. The consequential outcome of this, that you will give no trade union and collective bargaining rights to the workers, is again a source of the problem. All of you may remember, I don't know how many of you do actually, that on the morning of the tragedy, pressure was in fact put on the workers who were outside and refusing to go in. And the basic message they were given by the overseers coming presumably from the proprietors is that if you do not go in, you will lose your job. And in interviews which were conducted by injured women lying in the hospital, that what choice did I have? If I did not go, I would lose my job, and who would then feed my children? Or who would pay for their school? Now, this could only have happened if these 3,000 workers were working there as individuals, because any individual is weak and vulnerable and can be put under pressure. But had these people been part of a collective organization represented in trade unions, there is no way that any employer could have told 1,000 workers or 500 workers in the factory where they were working, that you have to put your life at risk and go in at work, because he would have dealt with 1,000 people who would be able to meet him as their equal. So that part of this tragedy originated in the unequal relationship between the owners and the workers, which is central to our problem. The third major issue, of course, is the whole crisis in our governance system. That at the end of the day, you have got a machinery of governance which does not function. That all your regulatory agencies are there to market their services and to in fact give whatever the customer wants. They have no... Come in, Kadir. Thank you. We're happy to have the minister with us so he can at least hear this part of my remark. That part of the systemic problem that you have over here is that there is no governance in this country which is capable of regulating anything, because all the regulators are in the market to market their services. So how do you regulate in a situation where in fact no one is willing to be held accountable for doing their duty? It is only when 1,300 people are killed that we then start arresting mayors and we start taking into account engineers and others who were in fact failing to do their duty. Now this is a reflection on the whole state of governance in the country, and Mr. Qadir, as the minister, is 20 times more aware than I am of this crisis of governance in this and any other government which in fact exists, because Amir Khusro Mahmood Chowdhury is not unaware as a former minister of this crisis of governance. It isn't that things were greatly improved in the tenure when his party was in power. So this is an ongoing crisis which now has to be faced, where it has now cost 1,300 lives. Finally, you have an insight into the nature of our politics, that the most visible face in this whole Rana Plaza affair, the great Mr. Rana, who became an accidental hero or villain in our history, was himself part of a political process where people like him can thrive, that they have become the lifeblood of political parties. And unless major parties take into account that they need to rebuild their organizations at the base and to in fact see that it does not depend in any way on people of this nature who can use their political influence to exercise pressure on the regulatory and administrative agencies, again this problem is going to repeat itself. Now here again, it isn't that this is a problem faced by one party. Mr. Khosrow is no less familiar with this phenomenon in his own party and everyone who is engaged in this variety of politics. So we have to deal with this problem. So when we get on with this discussion, we have got an immediate task, which is to exercise oversight. One of the problems with both people who have served as ministers know is that a great deal is going on inside their governments, where even ministers know nothing about what is actually happening. And so all these 20 different things which are taking place, if I were to interrogate Mr. Qadir as to how much he knew about any of this and whether he could tell me what is happening, I doubt if he would be able to get pass marks in such an examination. So in these circumstances, what we are trying to do before you is to help this government and any other government by in fact giving them a unified body of independently assessed information, which then becomes a political and administrative resource to help you to then discharge the main responsibilities for which you have been elected. So do not treat this exercise by this community from civil society as part of an adversarial process to the government. This is in fact to provide you with the sort of support which unfortunately the nature and quality of the governance process in Bangladesh does not permit you to have, because most of the subordinates beneath you spend half their time and energy concealing what is happening rather than informing you on what is happening. And that if you want real friends and support, you better look to people who do not have a vested interest in keeping you misinformed about the state of affairs in your process of governance. So these are some of the issues that I think are going to be presented, and we hope that the longer term issues that I have indicated to you will in fact also remain part of the discussion, where in fact our development partners should be made to realize that this is not just a problem of malgovernance and misbehavior on the part of people in one country, Bangladesh. In a more fundamental way, it is the global system which has created and reproduced these conditions, and we have to also address this problem globally. And this issue must be spelled out loud and clear by Mr. Khader, by all of civil society, in the industry itself, in our interface with our counterparts in the international community. With these words, let me hand over to Muazzam. He and his associates should be congratulated because they have worked long hours with very little support. No, actually with considerable input from our partners, but they had to put it all together. So let them make the presentation. This is a first presentation. After our discussions, we will refine it and make this into a finished document. And our eventual idea is that similar presentations should be made periodically over the next year, so that we will never forget this issue, and this will always be brought before the attention of the public. Our media partners are expected to play a very important role. All of you are also in a position to publicize this on a regular basis, so that this remains a living issue over the next year and even longer, over a longer period of time.